Oh, I want to work with you guys. This is this is like love language to me.
What would happen if we just told the truth?
Welcome to TruthWorks, where we dig into the nitty-gritty of leadership and work.
And what needs to change? I'm Jessica Neal.
And I'm Patty McCord.
Our journey together started in HR, but trust us, it's evolved into something wild, honest, and well, a bit rebellious.
So throw out the handbook. We're here to redefine rules to work for us, not against us.
Let's dive into another episode.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to TruthWorks. Today, our guest is William Vanderbloemen. William's the founder and CEO of Vanderbloemen Search Group, and he's been an unlikely business expert over his long and continuing career. Combining over 15 years of ministry experience as a senior pastor with the best practices of executive search, William created a brand new industry, executive search for faith-based organizations. He also has experience as a manager in human resources in a Fortune 200 company, and he's just written a book about unicorns, which we want to talk about today. So welcome to the podcast, William.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be with you guys. I've actually followed your work back to the, whatever the right word term is for the deck at Netflix. I mean, that's you guys, we wrote it's been 7 years ago, we wrote a culture book. And yours was a big resource.
Oh, thank you.
Thank
That's
you.
really great. You know, so to defy the myth that I wrote the Netflix culture deck, I didn't. In fact, Jessica had as much input into it as anybody. We would do it chapter after chapter, and we would run it through the company, and everybody would get a chance to give input to it. Because back in the day, when you're talking about the deck, it was literally a PowerPoint presentation.
I believe that.
Yeah,
So-
it was. But you're selling yourself short, Patty, because Patty, I think, before we started the podcast, the three of us were having a conversation about HR folk. And Patty was the HR folk at the time that wanted to do things differently and challenge the system and challenge the norms. And you were a pioneer in those things. So
The truth is, and we can talk about this because it'll be really interesting to talk about coming from like pastor church. So I worked with an engineer, a software engineer who saw the world in black and white. And he would just say things to me like, performance reviews, what's the point? And I'd be like, everybody does them. You know what I mean? And I just, after years of hanging out with him, I just started every day. I'd open my eyes and go, why do we do this? You know, and if we started over, is this what we would do? Really? I mean, does it make sense in modern times? So the other thing that you've written about that I thought was interesting too was about remote work, and that's a place we can touch on too. So
Yeah.
Well, first of all, okay, I have to know.
Yeah.
So you're a pastor.
Probably a matter of opinion, but yeah.
Well, you were, yeah. And then you went into executive search. I just want to know the story. How did that happen? Because that's kind of unusual. No.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, stories get compressed and more elegant with time.
Yeah.
So, it's messier back then than what I'll tell you. But the short version is worked at a great church. I was in the Presbyterian world, which is a small world. But
I'm
in
a
that
Presbyterian.
world, okay. So in the Presbyterian world, I got to be the lead pastor, senior pastor at a very young age, 31, which I know that's not young in the tech world, but in the Presbyterian world, like
It's young.
Mhm.
55 is the young adult Sunday school class. But very young at probably, this sounds awful, but probably one of the top 3 or 4 Presbyterian churches in the country. Amazing place. So they took 3 years to find me.
Huh.
I served 6 years, went through a divorce, which I would not recommend to listeners, but it happens.
Mhm.
Mine was not one the tabloids would have bothered with. It wasn't salacious enough to warrant that. But nonetheless, here I am, a single dad with 4 kids, and what am I going to do? And a friend of mine said, come work with me at a very large oil and gas company, like Fortune 200. So pretty good size. I think the market cap was a little bigger than Starbucks at the time.
Mhm.
And I'm like, what do I know about, dead dinosaurs? And he said, no, you know people. So we're going to do a management rotation, like move you around the company. And we'll start with HR because you know people. Like, great. I'd never worked in HR other than hiring people. Had an HR director at our church. We probably had 300 employees with everybody all in. So anyway, while I was there, the CEO who'd been there 9.5 years, I had no idea how long a run that is for a Fortune 200, but that's on out there, right? He said, it's time to find the next CEO. And they hired this thing called a search firm.
Mm-hmm.
And they hired Korn Ferry, which I assume a lot of people listening know. It's the biggest in the world. Some would say the best. 90 days later, they had their next CEO. Totally seamless. So here I am, totally neophyte in this oil and gas world. 90 days, done. And because I was in HR, I was on the succession team.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was like the third string water boy, but I was on the team. So I got to see it, and it was pretty elegant. And I just thought back to this amazing church that I worked at, which was 3 years to find me. I stayed 6 years, 3 years to find the next person.
Uh-huh.
And everybody thought that was normal.
Yeah.
And so I just walked away going, why in the, what are we living in the Stone Age? Like, could we take what I saw here, like study really, how do you do this right? Which is important in search because there's no barrier for entry. You just hang a shingle and say, I do search, which kind of like buying a used car before the internet.
Yeah.
It's like, so.
Tires look good.
Exactly. So I wonder if we could take that, go learn that. And then what I know about church, because it's a business, but it's not a business. It's quirky, and try and create a better solution. And Adrian and I had just gotten married. We had just blended our families. She had 2, I had 4. We had a house we could barely afford. And I came home and said, I think I'm supposed to quit my job and start something new for the church. And she looked at me and said, oh, that's because churches love new ideas, right?
I like your wife. I like her. I like Adrian.
Right.
She's really smart.
Yeah.
She has questionable taste in men, but she's really smart.
Yeah.
So anyway, and it was the fall of 2008, which was a brilliant time to quit.
Good time to start a new business. Yeah.
So now you know how smart the guy you're talking to is. Hang up quickly, So now I guess we'll be 17 years this year. We started, I didn't know how dumb this was, but we started as retained executive search. So if you're in HR at all, you understand that language, but that's like starting at the top where most of the time you start down and work your way up. I was too dumb to know that. So I was like, nope, we're going to be retained. That's that. And 17 years later, we've completed 3,500 searches. We'll probably cost $4,000 this year. And it's grown. It was just help congregations find a pastor. Then it turned into schools, find a headmaster. And then it turned into relief organizations, find a CEO. And now, interestingly, we get like just values driven that are really interested in developing their people. Those people are coming to us because it's like, you can figure out how to decode culture. We'll let you figure out our particular industry.
I have to interrupt you, William, and tell you how I met Jessica. So Jessica was our retained headhunter.
Oh, wow.
Right. She was our executive search firm person. She hired most of our senior tech people and all of our vice presidents, right? Or most of them at the time, right? So I go to my boss at that time and I said, hey, Rita, I've got this idea. I think it's ridiculous that we're spending a fortune paying all these headhunters. I want to hire, remember Jessica Neal? I want to hire her. And he goes, oh, that's a great idea. That's wonderful. Oh, I love her. And I said, by the way, I'm going to pay her. And I named some exorbitant amount of money at the time. And he's like, there's no way. Nobody in HR makes that kind of money. I'm like, profit center, dude.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, right?
And probably less than you were paying in fees.
But a huge part of our cultural evolution was Jessica, because she brought executive search techniques and methodologies and thinking to our company. So, because my background is recruiting, I'm like, she's not doing anything magic. She's just doing it really efficiently.
Well, I was doing it efficiently, but I think going back to your point, William, I understood the culture and the values. And
well, it's like an organ transplant. I
Yeah.
tell people,
Yeah.
and I actually interviewed transplant doctors about this, like what separates the best from the rest. To a name, they all said to me, getting the donor list is hard, but the real art is the tissue match.
Interesting.
You can put a healthy heart into a healthy body. If the tissue doesn't match, it's a bad ending for everyone.
No, yeah, that makes sense. And that's I'm going to use that. Can I use that?
Absolutely.
Because it's true. I mean, that is the organ rejection is real, especially
Yep.
as you go higher up in the roles, right? So executives, C-level folks, when you don't get that right tissue connection, I mean, and also it can be detrimental to the business.
And I know if you experience, let's talk about this. I mean, our CFO hired on resume, right? He would say to me, "Why are you giving me this person to talk to? Look at their crappy companies. Look at the terrible school they went to. Look at their title progression." It was like everybody had to have the right pedigree. And I think how many years did it take us for him to say, "I'll see him"?
It took a little bit of time, but we convinced. We finally convinced him. But William, and I loved that. I think I heard you saying this on another podcast or talk you were giving, but you were saying it really doesn't have much to do with pedigree and resume. And
I think it's less and less.
And do you think it's different for nonprofits?
Yes and no.
I don't think so.
Oh, well, yes and no. No, here's the thing.
Yeah.
Everybody who runs a nonprofit, church is the worst. Senior pastors see some great executive in their church that is killing it and has made all the money they want to make, and they want to move from success to significance. So those pastors, like, they're a great business person, they'll kill it here. And that works about half the time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they're a known entity. The ball game in nonprofit is volunteer recruiting, training, and retaining.
Yeah.
And that's very different than the corporate world where you just fire them and move on.
Mm-hmm.
So it's yes and no would be the answer.
Mm-hmm.
But, in our world where we're doing probably more nonprofit than for-profit, but it's changing quickly. We're more and more and more for-profit that's values driven.
Mm-hmm.
I think that our clients are far more interested in alignment with cultural values and that the core values. I mean, the same thing you had at Netflix. It's not, spiritual or whatever, but it's like I had a client the other day said, "I don't know how to teach culture.
Uh-huh.
I don't know how to coach it. So I'd rather just hire the match." And it's like they've been through so much pain. I have a friend who wrote an article years ago for the New York Times. It still gets clicks. And you don't even have to read the article. Here's the title. "What do you do with the brilliant jerk?"
Yeah. Well,
Yeah. We talked about that.
We talk about that a lot. Yeah. I wrote one for HBR called "Stop Hiring for Culture Fit."
Oh.
But this is what I want to delve into. And when I wrote it was like, I want to have a beer with you, right? I want to hang out with you. I want to be your best friend.
That's not culture fit.
You love playing soccer. I love playing soccer, right? You love Manhattans. I love Manhattans. And so my point was like, wait, it's values. It's not. Culture had become such a word that had no meaning.
That's right.
So talk to me about your experience with that. What does it mean to you? What's culture fit?
Yeah. So for us, there's so many good definitions of culture. I don't know that there's one that works, but back in 2017, 16, we were winning a ridiculous amount of awards. You know how you guys have been through this. It kind of snowballs. Once you win one award, you start, like, it was best place to work. And then it was top company culture for Entrepreneur Magazine. And then it was best office dog in the city of Houston. I mean, it got kind of stupid. So, I mean, I'm not kidding. Like,
no, we know.
Well, okay. That's fierce competition.
So my marketing director said, "William, we've got to write a book on this." I'm like, "Why?" And she said, "Because we're going to stop winning awards one day." And she was right. But I just said, I'm not going to do a study of ourselves, which is what most books are. It's the Mercedes, the Nordstrom Way, the work rules. You guys know the list of all these books. I'd rather look at, let's pick 150 different organizations, for-profit, nonprofit, faith-based, not faith-based, that are winning similar awards and see if they're common denominators, right? Mm-hmm. So it led to anything I write is a result of research. Mm-hmm. And so the book's called Culture Wins. I think you can still get it on Amazon. But in that, I came up with a definition just talking to all these CEOs and CHROs about what they're doing with culture. So for me, the definition is if your mission is the task you're trying to accomplish as a business, your big, hairy, audacious goal, whatever it is, if that's the mission, then your culture is how you as a team behave with one another as you're getting that mission done. And it's not the go have a beer together. I mean, that's a fun byproduct sometimes, but it's more like we say it this way when we're teaching teams how to figure out what those cultural values are, because it's not, oh, I'm going to go up on the mountain and come up with some cool words and that's cultural values. No, it's an archaeological dig. So the question we tell people to ask in a team meeting is, if you want to talk about culture, start with this. Let's tell stories about the times we've really won.
Oh.
When we're really getting it done. Everybody pick a story. And that's a great meeting. Everybody loves that. And then you follow up with a question. Okay, look at all these stories that are on the giant Post-its around the room. Let's answer this question. When we are functioning at our very best, how do we behave that's common to us, but uncommon to other teams around us?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's our weird? You know, what's and you guys know this, you uncovered it at Netflix, but it's not like my favorite story in writing that book was a giant company, 7th biggest in the world, that had in their elevator lobby their 4 core values. And I won't remember them to a name, but it was like trust, integrity, and then something like that. That was Enron.
Yeah, I did that too. It's in my book too. Yeah, it was carved in marble on the entrance to their building. Yeah.
Probably marble from like Florence.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But it's not what you want to be or what you're pretending to be. It's how you really, when the heat's on and you're doing well, how do we do work in a way that makes us different? And frankly, it changed our interviewing and our recruiting for our own company. Wow. We started with our interviews. If you got through the first few rounds and you got to an on-site, I started trying to talk people out of working for us.
Yeah, me too.
We are crazy. And we have 9 clear markers of how we're crazy. There are cultural values. There are smart people that would never want to work here. And I don't want you to walk into a mess.
Right.
So you need ridiculous responsiveness is one of ours. We should probably be in therapy for how quickly we get back to each other, right? And we've had to build guardrails around that. But you might be an all-star player, but if you can't live with that, please walk away now. I'll get you an earlier flight home.
Yeah.
So it's like that. That's what I think culture, when you really get down to it, it's not what I like to have a beer. It's like, what's our quirkiness that makes us good at what we do? And let's hire around.
I mean, I did the same thing. One of ours was freedom and responsibility and having huge responsibility. I remember interviewing somebody from Apple who said, well, you don't have a time off policy. And I just got married. Congratulations. And I just had my first child. Again, congratulations. And, I'm kind of a workaholic. I'm like, so you want to be a good parent and a good husband. Yeah. I'm like, you
need a time off policy to do that.
If you need a time off policy to do that, hey, listen, I remember my first kid. I remember how crazy it was. Structure helps. Apple's a terrific company. Stay there until things change for you and then call me back, right? Because this is really, we are not going to be a good fit for you right now because you're not going to
tell you to go home.
We're not going to tell you to go home.
Yeah, I really, because I want to be able to have time for this because I want to talk about Be the Unicorn. And I want to talk about the 12 habits. Mm-hmm. What I loved about the book is that, these aren't things that are characteristics, right? Like these are habits, right? That's different than a characteristic. It's things that you can learn. So pick a couple of I'm sure you love all 12, but pick a couple of the most impactful ones.
Yeah, no. So the book started out as a really selfish project. Like we were in the pandemic, we were in the shutdowns. Most of our clients at the time were churches and schools, all of which were shut down indefinitely, which will change your volume of work.
Yeah.
We did get to do some research. And we said, well, when this is over, how do we get better? Mm-hmm. Well, you guys know, every now and then you meet somebody and within 5 minutes, you're like, oh boy, this one's special. Mm-hmm. And maybe they've got pedigree, maybe they don't. But and the more you study them, because you can't make a decision in 5 minutes, the more you realize, they got an it factor that's pretty off the charts. So we said, how many of those have we met? And do they have anything in common? Mm-hmm. So we found 30,000, and we keep maniacal records. I tell people all the time of the best. Well, we have hundreds of thousands that we've interviewed.
You had 30,000?
30,000 would be the cream of the crop,
Okay.
right?
It factor.
That's right. So we're like, well, what do they have in common? Because if I can learn to spot them quicker, I'm a better search firm. It was a very selfish project. So we did all this surveys and research, and I'll say you the details. But what popped out were 12 clear things they had in common. And I love doing this podcast with you guys because you know what I'm talking about when I say habits.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not talking about traits.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, those habits were nothing that I expected. I expected traits. My Gen Z kids would say you were probably looking for a guy in finance, trust fund, 6'5", blue eyes. You know, the whole thing. It was none of that. It was habits that were, and you guys are more expert than I am. Correct me if I've got a bad title here, but I call it H-to-H skills, human to human skills.
Yeah, I like that.
You know, kind of, not B to B, but H to H. It was how they treated people.
Mm.
And it was uncanny how consistent the 12 habits were. And they were different for different people. The gift mix was, you know, a compliance officer is very different than a sales guy, right? But all 12 were there at a level that was much higher than everyone else.
Mm.
And that's when we said, oh my goodness, this is not a playbook for us. This is a manual for everyone to learn how to stand out. And as tech keeps replacing human jobs and will, like, what better time to figure out how to stand out in the crowd?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As a human.
Yeah.
And AI cannot do H to H by definition.
Yeah, right. So give us a couple, your favorites.
Yeah. What are the faves?
I'll leave you with one example of responsiveness. And that's this. We use HubSpot, which is like inbound marketing, you know, fill out a form and somebody will get back to you, you know, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. We were hilarious. We were very early adopters with HubSpot.
Yeah.
And I got to be friends with the founders.
Yeah.
And Brian Halligan called me when they were getting ready to do their IPO. Said, do you mind if we use you as our story for the roadshow?
Yeah.
We are something special. We must be getting it right. I said, Brian, absolutely. And that's such a compliment. I mean, golly, I didn't think we were good enough for that. And he said, well, actually, if I'm being honest, the whole roadshow is designed around HubSpot can work for anyone.
That's right. Yeah. Let's get out the church people. That'll do it. Yeah. They can do anything.
So in learning that HubSpot world, there was a big study done around inbound marketing. And so the question was, how much does response time matter when somebody fills out a form?
Mm-hmm.
You know, where's the critical break point? And so there's just thousands and thousands of companies that all this data analytics boiled down to if you get back to somebody within a minute of them filling out a form in an intentional way, not a chatbot, you have a 98% chance of talking to that person.
Wow.
If you wait 20 minutes, you have a 60% chance.
Huh.
If you wait 24 hours, you have a less than 1% chance.
Wow.
And the industry average response time is 42 hours. So if you want to stand out in the, I got back to people quickly because I had 6 kids and now 7 to feed. And I'm trying this crazy thing, new idea for churches. It's like, you need some help? I am on it.
Yeah.
And it happened to work. And people kept saying, you actually got back to us. So that one is my personal favorite.
Right.
The one I really suck at.
Okay.
Self-awareness.
And
it's interesting. We asked all 30,000. We surveyed the 30,000, and then we found 250,000 people that were just normal, nice people. And we, did compare contrast of responses. And so we asked the 30,000 to force rank the 12. Like, what's your best and what are you worst at? And of course, the force ranking was all over the board because you got different kinds of people doing different kinds of work. So no clear winner for top or middle. But last place was a clear, undeniable consensus, and it was self-awareness. The unicorns all think they need to get better at this.
Because it takes your whole life, right? You never get it.
The 250,000 people, we said, okay, of these 12 things, give me a 1 to 5. 1, I'm terrible. 5, I'm awesome. That sort of thing. 91% of the general population said that they're better than average at self-awareness.
Huh.
I'm not like a mathematician, but there is no group on the planet where 91% is better than average.
Wow, that's fascinating.
And people are like, well, that's not me. That's not me. And so I talk to public speakers a lot. I'm like, do you remember the first time you heard your voice recorded?
Uh-huh.
Horrible.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not me.
Yeah. Right.
That's not me. I hate that voice. I'm glad I don't sound like that. That's the blind spot. So
Yeah.
the more I studied that and the more I saw the research, where I thought, oh, William, you're one of those people that think you're in the 91%. You got to get better.
Right.
But to me, if the 12 habits were an archway, self-awareness is the keystone.
Mm.
You find somebody that knows that and is working on it and is aware. I mean, even down to the interview question, like, tell me about yourself, which is a horrible question. It's
yeah, right.
icebreaker. What if instead of, going into some innocuous script, you say, well, here's the thing. Patty, you're in this high growth company at Netflix. And that probably means the lead job descriptor for everybody is other duties as necessary, right? I'm a 7 on the Enneagram. I love the next party. I love the next challenge. And I got a lot to learn. But let me tell you, in the last 3 jobs I've had, the places that I got the most accolades was when I was asked to do something I'd never seen before.
Yep.
And so I would go crazy working for the federal government. And I'd probably get fired pretty fast. I'm not good at that. But man, if you're on a rocket ride and you need somebody who can learn on the fly, that's something I'm good at. That's something I'm wired to do. And so when I look at this job and I look at how I am learning about myself, I'm thinking, I got a lot to learn, but man, the wiring might mean there's something worth exploring here. Now, that's a different answer.
Oh, I love that.
That's really wonderful. Yeah.
We want everybody to read this book, right? And we hope that you do. What are the things that they can do tomorrow, today, whatever, to start working on these habits and learn differently?
My publisher's going to kill me, but you can Google Vanderbloemen book summary. All the book summary companies have done a quick summary, and you can get a taste of things. If you get into it and you're like, how do I get better? It might help to figure out what you're naturally gifted at best and where you're lacking. And I've got friends, smart friends on both sides of this. Some say start with your weaknesses, others say start with your strengths, but whatever, at least know where you are, develop some self-awareness. We actually, this is going to sound salesy, but we built a software tool for people to be able to do that. So we surveyed the 30,000 and the Gen Pop, and it's vanderindex.com. And then you can see, okay, this gives me a starting point. And the book is not sequential. You can read the chapters in any order. So it's kind of like a choose your own adventure book from when I was a kid. And if I need to work, you can just go read that one. And, if you really want to get after it with a team, there's a workbook and all that. But what can I do today? I would say get a book summary and maybe go take the Vander Index and see, like, what are the ones I'm better at? And I'm going to get to work on that, or where am I weak? And I'm going to get to work on that.
I'm going to do it. When you're talking about the self-awareness thing, I was just thinking about the opposite end. Think about how many times that you ended up saying goodbye to the person because they thought they knew everything. Right? It's like, oh yeah, I'm totally self-aware. I know the answer to everything. Right? And it's like, and the people who are the least curious and the most sure of themselves and their knowledge are often the least useful people on a team because they're not interested in engaged in learning.
Oh, I want to work with you guys. This is like love language to me.
Oh, well, you're like love language to us.
Us too. I mean, can't you think of a million times you've been interviewing somebody? It's like, oh my God, will you just leave the room?
Yeah.
I mean, hello.
Jessica, I don't know, you exec recruiter, like, I don't know how many people I've interviewed now. It's an obscene amount.
Same.
But I can count on my hands the number of people that have said to me in an interview, I got fired from that job and it was my fault. Let me tell you why.
Oh, yeah. Nobody says that.
That's self-awareness.
Yeah.
And I'll hire that unless it's like felony theft or something.
Yeah, right.
I was talking to a woman the other day, and they were struggling with like how to tell the story, right, of them leaving their job. And they weren't leaving under bad circumstances. It's sort of like mutual thing. But but she's a high level person and should have been the CEO, wasn't going to get it, right? Like, just tell that story. That is a fine story to tell. That there's no wrong in that. You were going to be the CEO. They didn't end up choosing you. That's not a failure, by any means.
Well, can I give you one quick actionable step that's not in the book?
Yeah,
sure.
Okay. So one of the habits is likability. Okay. And I'll give you two. First thing, people who are really likable ask a lot of questions. They refuse to talk about themselves, and they ask people about the other person. Like, they turn the conversation toward the other person invariably. And the most successful people I know, you can't get them to talk about themselves. It's really wild. So ask questions. But here's the one that's not in the book. Look people in the eye. Now, I mean this like biologically. Oh, I look people in the eye. Probably you don't.
Yeah.
Probably you're looking at the bridge of the nose. Probably you're jumping back and forth. 90% of humans are right eye dominant. You only use one eye to see, the other's peripheral vision.
Right.
90% look out of their right eye. Look someone dead in their right eye for the entirety of a conversation and just see what happens. And if you see them shifting their eyes, well, then their left eye dominance, go over there. But you got a 9 in 10 chance of looking them. No one looks anyone dead in the eye now. My kids are great to call us and FaceTime us, but I want to call it nose time because all I see is their nose while they're carrying their phone. They don't even look at it. They just talk into it. No one looks anybody in the eye. Unicorns look people in the eye. That's not in the book. That's bonus content.
Oh, we're talking dirty secrets here. Yeah.
Okay. So now I have one more question on. So you did this research, wrote this book. How has it changed how you approach your clients and search?
We are so much more focused on learning the client and where they are a unicorn and not, and then learning the candidate and where they're a unicorn and where they're not, so we can get that tissue match down. Because we've got some fantastic clients that really smart people would get fired from instantly. And we've got really smart clients. I've actually felt a little more licensed to say to some of our clients, you're crazy. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, but like, you're a little weird. You move this fast, or you
don't,
or you don't, right? So I'm not here to judge that. I'm just here to find your long lost family member.
Right.
And it's changed the way I view through the lens. And it's also only amplified my belief that the future of success in the workplace is those H to H skills. I'm convinced of it.
Yeah.
The other stuff is going to get automated. It's just, what can we add as humans to one another?
Oh, yeah. I love that. We always like to leave the listeners with a nugget, right? That they can take from you. And you've given them lots today. But what's the one thing you would want them to do after listening to this podcast?
Do a serious look in the mirror about how you're treating others. I mean, not to get super preachy, Jessica, but it's interesting. The 12 habits are actually just 12 different manifestations of treat others like you'd like to be treated.
Yeah.
We joke the publisher didn't want to have unicorn in the title because of tech and kid books and, it would get confused.
I love it.
And so we joked that the alternate title is, oh, wow, I guess mom was right.
I would say at Netflix, and you probably remember this, Patty, if someone came into the lobby and was rude to anyone, we would never hire them. Because if you were going to treat the people at the front desk that way and then come in and treat us a different way, you weren't going to last.
Yeah, we always followed up with the receptionist too. Or we train them. We train them to call us and go, "Hey, by the way, William was kind of a jerk in that."
Yeah, we're like, if you see any of that, we want to know.
That's good.
Okay, want to do career confessions, Jess?
Yes. Would you like me to read it?
Yeah.
The title of the question is leadership right for me? My career has rapidly taken off over the last 3 years, and after a quick succession of promotions, I've ended up in a role that has more leadership responsibilities than I anticipated. I'm not against the idea of personal growth, and I enjoy new challenges, but I've always considered myself to be somewhat of an introvert and want to know some tips for leading when being a louder voice at the table is new to me.
Wow.
What do you think, William?
I think way to go on getting the promotions.
Yeah.
And I think you guys might have a different opinion, but a whole lot of the top of the org chart people that I deal with are introverts.
Mhm.
So you're not alone.
Mhm.
And what's great about an introvert in leadership is if you'll lean into that a little bit, you're probably a great observer.
Mhm.
You're probably going to sit back and watch before you pass judgment. And I think people will follow a quiet leader more than they'll follow the loudmouth leader.
I do too.
100%.
I wouldn't be afraid of that one bit. The second thing I'd say is energy management might be the difference maker for you. And what do I mean when I say that? I mean, there are blocks of time. Everybody's got a different block of time where they're really productive, right? Some of my creatives, if I really want something done, I tell them, go home now and work on it at midnight, right? Because that's when they're in their zone. Me, I'm morning. My best energy has to go in the morning. If you at 3:00, which we're headed toward now, I will do the death march to the coffee machine because it's just a hard hour for me. And as an introvert, I would try and figure out when that energy time is for you, and I'd schedule the meetings you have to deal with other people during that time.
That's great advice.
Very practical.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think too, I think introverts are amazing leaders. And you're right. A lot of the people at the top are introverts. And I think observation is maybe one great trait that an introvert will have, but also listening.
Yeah, I was going to say that too.
And asking questions. And the only other advice I'd give this person is to really find out what's required of a leader in your organization and see if that's exciting to you.
Yeah, and you could probably find out some of it by going back and asking the people that promoted you why they did.
Yeah, why they wanted to. Yeah.
Why they wanted to. What is it that because you've already got, like you said, congratulations, you've gotten pretty far. So you're doing something right already.
I wonder if you could ask whoever promoted you, I'm so flattered and humbled, and I'm also in a new place. Who are some other people that have risen through the ranks like this that I can go learn with?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Find somebody who has the job you want someday and invite them out for something, right? And the only thing you need to find out during that meeting, the only thing is, tell me about how you got where you are.
That's so good.
And literally everyone on the planet will say, well, Jessica, I tell you, let me tell, boy, was it a long and white. People love to tell their story.
Yes.
William, this was such a joy. I know you're hitting your witching hour. Mm-hmm. So we'll let you do the death march to the coffee machine. Thank you for bearing with us.
No, it's all good. I tell people in the church world, 3 p.m. is actually when Jesus died. So
there you go.
A really hard hour.
It's a hard hour.
I'm just gonna go and think about this for a minute with a large cup of coffee.
I think Jesus would appreciate you taking a moment and having some coffee.
Well, you guys are awesome. And I can't thank you enough for having me on. It's just an absolute kick to be with you.
Yes, you too.
Yay. Thanks for listening to TruthWorks. This episode was produced by Megan Hayward. Thank you to Kathleen Speckert and the whole Edit Audio team.